First and foremost, the question of empathy is not about feeling sorry. The question of empathy isn't necessarily even to be able to understand what it must feel like to wear your shoes, sit in your seat, to break bread with your family, etc. Empathy, if it were simply that, it wouldn't be a design problem. From the vantage point of being a designer, the question of empathy is more a matter of the process of inquiry, the process of discovery, and at some point in time, the process of prototyping, building, putting something out in the world. It has to start from somewhere. If we're just about making great products, we wouldn't need to come together. And to a degree, if the president reminds us that what Steve Jobs was extraordinary at was ensuring that the products he put out we would want, but the real question is, what does it mean to want? What does it mean to crave? What does it mean to have options and lean one way or the other? So to that degree, I want to speak not about the future, but about history to a certain degree. In 1949, if you had the pleasure or displeasure of being in Mann Gulch, Montana, you would have seen 3,000 acres of forest go up in flames in under 10 minutes. Imagine the speed at which flame has to cross space, going up, leaping, racing down, to swallow 3,000 acres of old forest in 10 minutes. So imagine being a human being in that situation. You can't, I can't. But conjure sort of in a fictitious way what it must be like. So imagine that 14 men, 90% of them the age of undergrads at Furman, 21, 22, maybe 23 years old. 14 men leap out of a plane, because what firefighters that jump out of planes do is they literally dive into the fire to put it out so that you never have to notice the fire could swallow up your home. It's an extraordinary act, not of bravery, but of intention. So imagine a situation, 14 men plus one that was on the ground serendipitously, had to fight a fire that was moving so fast that it literally could lift the man off the ground. The speed and power of that flame could levitate a man or woman. The fire has that kind of power. Now imagine that fire is moving, regardless of your expertise, at such a speed that 3,000 acres will disappear in 10 minutes. Classically, if you go to business school or law school, the Mann Gulch story is told as a case study about leadership. Because there was a leader of those men who made a decision, not only to put them in that situation, but actually to guide them out. And of the 14 men that went in, 3 lived. And the reason the story is talked about is because we are fascinated by results. We're fascinated by products. We're fascinated by decisions. We're fascinated by good, bad, and whether something is right. So in business school, whether you're in Cambridge or Harvard or you're at law school, often the story is offered as a statement about leadership. Did Dodge, who was the leader of these men, make a mistake or succeed based on the following problem? The fire is moving at that speed. Everybody's an expert. They have a shovel, because you don't go in with hoses. You go in with a shovel. And they have axes. These are the tools. And he realized it was moving so quickly that if he didn't alter everything that was known about firefighting at that moment in time, all of them would die. And he did something extraordinarily radical. Took out a match, threw it into the brush, which actually wasn't innovative. Indians, Native Americans have been doing that for centuries. What was innovative is he jumped into the fire. Threw the match, leapt into the fire. He risked bodily harm, but then little by little he created a bubble. The flames spread out. He created a safety zone, and he said to his men, jump. This is an extraordinary moment of innovation. Broke all the rules of conventional firefighting and leadership, came up with a solution, and he and 2 others survived. So the moral of the story is, be innovative and you will survive. Be innovative and you will be talked about. Here's the problem. The others died because they didn't follow him. So the question from a leadership standpoint is, did he make a good decision? The question from a leader or from a design standpoint is not about was he innovative. It's about could he empathize with his men facing that decision. So to a degree, it's about listening, not about communicating a solution. about sensing how somebody would respond at a moment of life and death. I'm interested as an educator, as a classroom teacher for about 15 years. I now have the privilege of designing schools at universities, and more importantly, I just geek out about this stuff. And I have 2 little kiddos who may one day come here or choose not to. I'm interested in, can we design empathy, not have character building programs, and not rush through empathy on the way to iteration and prototypes. I'm interested to a degree because this is what I do for a living. I want to share a short video that the folks at Edutopia, which is the George Lucas of Star Wars, George Lucas Educational Foundation, my team and their team teamed up. That was really not about designing a classroom, although it may appear to be that. It was more about listening. So I'll share this quickly and then go into details.
My name is Steve Mattice. I'm a math and science teacher here at Roosevelt Middle School. I would love to have a little more space just to be able to get to the kids without having to crawl over something or stand on a chair or climb over a desk, literally.
Teachers around the country will totally identify with this classroom. An incredible number of kids and limited space. He's got to focus on teams. So you see these groupings of 4, but at the same time, there's very little room from grouping to grouping. So one of the things we're going to be looking at is how does Steve move around the classroom?
What I would love to see is a little more room to write and put ideas down on anything, really.
A lot of people are talking about communication, about collaboration, but their spaces aren't speaking collaboration. So one of the things we do is try to match those places and the voice of place with their values.
We're really trying to imagine what's the possibility of going to school. What can happen in this day and age, whether it be with technology or kids teaming up, solving problems, and trying to make an impact in the world.
We're going into a classroom, identifying things that work and things that could work better, taking $1,000, a designer's eye, a lot of community resources. We try to match the physical classroom environment to teaching and learning goals. And in one weekend, we hopefully realize them.
Our question is how can we reimagine this classroom?
We created a gallery wall for them to facilitate visual listening.
It allows Mr. Mattice to kind of step out and look and watch the kids interact. And so he's getting a new lens. We really want to know about their learning styles.
When my teacher does projects like with games and stuff, it makes me want to participate more.
Peer-to-peer learning, safety, trust, comfort, flow.
First things that kind of caught my eye were dry erase table surface, activate the back wall.
Yes, it's about time and money. And this weekend gets stressful, but really it's a transformation of the teacher into a designer, of the teacher into a hacker.
Guys, you ready?
Yeah!
My name is Steve Mattice. I'm a
So one way of looking at that story is a tome makeover for school. Right? Fun, playful, possibly transformative. It could require architects, painters, people to swing a hammer. Another way to look at that story is it was never about space. It was about listening for the right questions to ask, if that makes sense. It was about teachers not being pressured to be the answer, but instead to be empathetic and frankly inspired by the way their kids move, not where they should move to. And likewise, for us to be empathetic towards a teacher. This is a guy that all he wanted was for his kids to be able to be more capable, given what they already could do, who they already were. So my daily job is I work for a global architecture firm, and we have the privilege of designing schools like this. The country of Turkey came to us and said, could you design a model school to literally change middle school and high school education across an entire country. Very humbling. But what was more interesting is when they said that girls who are Muslim hit about the age of 12, they no longer can go to school. Because in Turkey, it is illegal to demonstrate your religious faith in a public institution. So imagine being a young woman of faith, not showing her faith, and there is no other option, and then say, oh, by the way, go to school. She can't. So how could you take that on as a design challenge, and how could a school become both an invitation and a Trojan horse? We have to get the architecture right. We have to get the software right. We got to get the lunch menu right. None of that ultimately matters. We have to change the trajectory of the question. We often do this in terms of space. We try to imagine how can we reinvent space, not so that the English department or the science program or music gets to be extraordinary, but how they collide. What does it mean to have everything you need just in time? We do that in terms of hacking spaces, not getting it right, actually letting it be just not quite right, but actually taking out the hammer with ourselves and the teachers and saying, let's get it right, but let's have the room keep changing. Not one versus the other, but constantly. We work with kids around the world. We run a program called Prototype. Basically, it says, don't learn to be a school architect. Don't redesign school. To be honest, no kid wakes up wanting to be either. Instead, it's what problem in your community matters. Let's use the design process to solve that. More importantly, we'll watch you. Because if we watch how you collaborate, maybe we can design spaces that are graceful enough to support who you are, not to mandate what we think you should be. And ultimately, we're geeks about design thinking and Post-it notes, but none of that matters. It matters in terms of the questions and words we pursue. So I'm interested in, like many, many people in this room, and even though you may or may not be a designer, you may at a gut level just get it, that if we just focus on objects, iPhone or not, it doesn't matter. If we focus on human beings, it will always matter. So I think a lot about design and thinking, and it turns out that a lot of people really think it's bogus, it's ridiculous. And you know what? They're really smart, and they got really good points. A lot of design thinking is not the way forward. But really, it's the second part of this is interesting to me. Not the is it killing creativity, that's provocative, that's just sexy, that's just the headline. The next one about if there's not a product, it's irrelevant. This is where I get interested. As a dad, if somebody said this about my child, we have to sit down and have a thoughtful conversation about what that means. My child is only going to be a product and not in process. I got a problem. More importantly, even if I've got a great answer, the product doesn't matter if the process wasn't compelling to you and to us. So I'm interested in this tension, not the right or wrong. I'm interested when TED sends a shipment of books to me and I look at this, which I just 2 weeks ago, and I'm like, my God, look at these books. Bell Labs, Xerox PARC, MIT Media Lab, Stanford D School. Ay caramba, that's the place I want to be. The Maker Movement, the Fab Lab Movement, Sal Khan and Khan Academy, the future of everything, right? And this is good stuff. There's nothing wrong with this. It's not even threatening. It's just the way it is. But something about it makes me a little uncertain. And it's not because as a teacher, I wouldn't be important there. That's actually that's the knuckle dragging on the ground problem. That's not the spirit of being human problem. I'm interested in what ties those together. So I'm going to go quickly to a sidebar. Because ultimately, this debate between PISA scores and GEM scores is the debate. PISA scores are essentially how you're graded. It's the GPA and ACT score for nations. So in 2009, 2010, PISA scores came in and said, we want to make sure that Singapore and America can be in competition about who's better at math. So you get scores like this. And the numbers don't even matter because it's all relative. We come up with our system, we figure out numbers. One is a little bit better, one's a little worse. And it turns out America has never been good at science. Since Sputnik, the 1960s, we put a man on the moon for the first time. No other country. We weren't good at math then either. We've never been in the top 5 ever. Yet we've had the audacity to say we can go to the moon. That to me is interesting. So here's the audacity goes to the moon. GEM scores, Global Entrepreneur Monitor, says not what is your math and English and science scores, which are all fine. What does your gut tell you that you can handle? What problems can you solve? All you entrepreneurial. Again, it's not either or, although it's interesting to see which countries do well in one, don't necessarily rank high. US has always been scrappy. Never been good at math and science. Interesting. However, Australia turns out to be good at both. Maybe we shouldn't talk about Finland and the US. We should go to Australia and learn about how to be in the outback, but also be innovative and also be intentional. But I don't care about either. I care about the collision. And I think the collision of those rigorous, data-based, all valuable, and the intuition, the gut, is really about what questions do you ask. So again, I'll go back to the early question. What do we mean by designing empathy for education? So very, very quickly, I'm only going to show you the first maybe 15 seconds of this video, but you'll get it. But if you ache to know more, the Google will take you there. And it's an extraordinary hospital in Cleveland. CEO says, if we don't understand our patients and their family, we have no business being in business. The questions they ask in this video that's about 4 minutes long are extraordinary because it's not about this person's in radiation, it's about the person wanting coffee right before they go into therapy. I'm interested if I can make an argument for 3 things. If you're a teacher or a parent, you're a provocative facilitator of the future capacity of mankind, you like design, you don't know anything about design, I'm going to make out 3 really quick arguments where design and education may meet that are ultimately about empathy. I'm going to use the word empowerment because I think that is about facing forward. One is Kiran Bursethi out of India. If she had said to you, in 4 years, I will have 30 million children around the world using design thinking for free, and they will be kindergartners through 8th graders. The D school at Stanford, extraordinary, a couple thousand. One teacher in India, 30 million. And it's about this idea that if we can listen to the child, what do you notice? What do you think you're capable of? I can make a difference. Both empathy from a design standpoint of empowering young people to listen for problems worth solving, not being given problems by teachers to solve. Empowering students to be problem finders, not problem solvers. Empowering learners to empower their community. This is what this night is about. In Bertie, North Carolina, the most impoverished county in all of North Carolina, it looks like a shop. It was the first time design had ever been taught. Students learned to make chicken coops that would make modernist painters envious. Gave them away. That's interesting. Then this happens. Their entire community gets leveled by a tornado. What's the design problem now? Especially as a student, 16, none of you will ever go to college. Your parents don't go to college. There is no future. And in 3 months, you've learned how to swing a hammer and make a chicken coop. So what's the problem? Habitat for Humanity? Do you go build houses? Here's what the kids at 16, 17 realized. Somebody will rebuild the house. That's the wrong problem for us to solve. Because if we have no fresh food and no economy and our parents can't build something, it doesn't matter if we have shelter. So what did the kids do? They built not just a farmer's market, which is elegant. They built an entire economic engine for a community and created jobs, all in the first 7 months for adults, without knowing anything about design, except how to ask the right question. Ultimately, how do we empower the world? The D School, if you've got to go anywhere, I highly recommend. Their napkin literally wrote best design program, period. It isn't about rank, it's about changing the game. When they do, they create programs like this. It's not about post-it notes, it's about, are you going to make a profound effect upon human beings? The 90% of the world's in poverty. Imagine 20 million children per year being born premature. That means that 50% of those 20 million will die within 6 months to a year. That means that 4 million child a year die, 450 per day will die. An incubator, a great solution, 20 grand a piece. So what do you do to solve it? Because this is what it looks like in most developing nations. The problem is you build a better incubator, the kids don't necessarily show up. Because for the families, it's about hugging that child, not about putting them in a machine. But if a parent can't see the heart rate go up and down, they won't put the child in the blanket to begin with. Ultimately, we can empower the world, we can iterate, we can prototype, we can launch, we can crush it. But we can also ask all the wrong questions. I'm going to argue that empathy isn't just the soft stuff on the way to the prototype, empathy is the prototype. And if we get that right, then we have the privilege of designing something that could test our theory. When I was 14 years old, I had the privilege of becoming a camp counselor, scared out of my mind because I had never done that. I had never worked with anybody with a handicap or disability, let alone an entire summer camp. And I was 14. The 11-year-old in the middle that looks like a pirate with red hair, named Uriah, he died 2 years later. This is not the point of that story. I thought my job as an educator at 14, being his camp counselor, was to keep him from hurting. His body was broken, he would collapse, seizures, he was covered in scars. The world was not built for him. I thought my job was to get him safely from one place to another. What I never failed to see was where he was looking. It was always the lake. Because when Uriah went to the lake, he became a porpoise, he became free, he was unencumbered by anything. I tried to get him from the lake to arts and crafts. I failed, and for 20-something years, I have struggled with the fact that as a designer, I failed most of the time when I think it's about the solution. Ultimately, it's not interesting what we can build, it's interesting why we choose to go forward. I'm deeply interested in what you're doing today, as long as we all deeply care about the ache and the longing and the possibility. The wood is the easy part, the boat is the easy part. I appreciate your time very much, and I'm in awe of this day.